2024 international rugby season is done, folks. How did the teams perform? Are we going to give these guys A's, B's, C's, or did they fail and get themselves some D's? We'll go through the Six Nations sides, the Rugby Championship sides, and I'll throw in Fiji and Japan into the mix as well. And you guys can let us know your thoughts, how you would rank the teams on how they went in this 2024 year. I am going to start with a couple of sides outside the Six Nations and Rugby Championship, namely Fiji and Japan. Fiji, I'm going to give them a solid B. Fiji won the Pacific Nations Cup, and they did it largely without their kind of big gun European-based players. They also managed to get a first win over the Welsh in Cardiff, so that was a good result for them. However, when they played Ireland, they lost that one pretty comfortably. When they played the All Blacks, they lost that one pretty comfortably. So there were a few games which they would have liked to push a bit closer. Access to players is obviously one of those things, kind of outside test windows and whatnot. But certainly I think a solid enough season for the Fijian lads. For Eddie Jones's Japan, though, I am going to give them a D. Just in that they didn't get the results that you would expect them to get. They have fallen away from the side that hosted the 2019 Rugby World Cup. You might put part of the blame of this at his predecessor, Jamie Joseph, for kind of hanging on to the veterans too long. Now Eddie Jones is having to go through a rebuild, but part of the problem with a rebuild is it can be a painful process. They hosted the Pacific Nations Cup final and got walloped by Fiji. That's a game they should be getting close. And then when they did have the chances to play the big sides, the likes of England, likes of New Zealand, even Italy, they got pretty well beaten. So Japan at the moment are just not there. But as I said, we do need to keep in mind that Eddie is blooding a bunch of young players. So it may be a bit of pain before we get some results from Japan. And then if we move on to Six Nations sides, I was a little bit torn what to do with these guys. England, because it's been a bit of a mixed bag. But I ended up going with a D. I don't know that you can pass England given the resources, given the players that they've got. They just lost too many of the big games. It's obviously easy to look back on that Irish win in the Six Nations, stopped a potential kind of Irish Grand Slam when Ireland were, seeming like they were going to get this kind of super slam, back-to-back Grand Slams. England were the ones who put a spanner in that works, but lost to Australia, a game over a rebuilding Aussie side at Twickenham. They lost to Scotland in the Six Nations. They lost all three matches against New Zealand, albeit competitive games. They lost to South Africa. They struggled against Wales. They struggled against Italy in the Six Nations. They didn't really put anybody away, apart from Japan. So I don't feel like England got enough. Now, do I think that they're going to be better in 2025? I reckon they will get more of the results because a lot of these games I'm mentioning that were losses were competitive. But based on results, and it is a results-based business, I don't think England got the results they should be getting. They should have pulled at least a couple of those close matches into wins to kind of get at least a passing grade for 2024. Now, another one of the Six Nations side, I'm going to give the Scots a C, which maybe feels a little bit harsh, but they finished fourth in the Six Nations. That Scottish squad should have been doing better in the Six Nations. This is another year where they have failed to live up to kind of the potential. France was still a bit hungover from the Rugby World Cup the previous year. They certainly didn't hit the ground running. Scotland didn't manage to beat them. Scotland didn't manage the games where they were facing those kind of top four sides. When they played the Box, when they played France, and when they played Ireland, couldn't get any wins over those big sides, despite the fact that this is a very talented Scottish squad. They beat Australia. But yeah, tours to America is kind of hard to judge. They certainly got to blood a bit of depth, but you feel like Scotland could have used just one big win in 2024 to really kind of say, they are up there with those top four sides, because it does feel like, and even when you look at the world rankings, there is a bit of a gap and Scotland is still kind of chasing. So I don't think fourth in the Six Nations is good enough for this Scottish side. As I said, they've had some big results. They got a massive win over Fiji when they played them. They certainly put the Aussies back in their place when they came to Murrayfield. But yeah, need to beat one of the big dogs to get a higher grade for mine. Speaking of the big dogs, the Irish, who've been under a bit of criticism recently, I'm still going to give them a B. They get the Six Nations title. Not a Grand Slam, but they still get the Six Nations title. They go down to South Africa and manage to win 1 out of the 2 games. South Africa have proved a very difficult team to beat this year. Ireland and Argentina, the only sides to get that done. And in the autumn games where they didn't really get close to hitting top gear, they still managed to win all but the game against the All Blacks. So it's a solid enough season from Andy Farrell. I don't think you'd quite give them an A like they've kind of had in previous seasons where they have looked relentless. They have looked a little bit stuttering in recent weeks. Andy Farrell and the Irish coaching staff in the future will have to look at some of the kind of more senior guys and blooding some of the youngsters. Will the depth be there? Will be kind of one that remains to be seen. But as I said, won the Six Nations, win over South Africa, and not perfect but solid enough from the Irish lads. France, also a little bit torn about whether to give them a B or a C. I ended up giving them a B. They beat the All Blacks at the end of the year. They came second in the Six Nations despite having a bit of a Rugby World Cup hangover, like I mentioned. They did it without Antoine Dupont, who has been their best player for quite some time. So that game against Ireland was a real stinker, and then they only managed to draw against the Italians, so it was a bit lackluster, but they still finished second in the Six Nations. They took a very much second string side over to Argentina and played their full strength side and managed to beat them. They did lose the second game, but they managed to get 1 out of 2 wins on their tour of the Americas. They also played Uruguay and got a good win there. And in the Autumn Nations Series, they managed to go 3 from 3. Only them and the Box managed to have a perfect record in the autumn, so it's a decent, solid enough passing grade for the French. Wales sadly have to go here. It's hard to get anything but a D if you don't win any games. No wins in 2024. I mean, the ones that particularly burn are they played the Aussies 3 times. And a lot of the things that we say is kind of wrong with Welsh rugby, and that the rugby union is not run that well. You could certainly say the same at times about the Aussie Rugby Union. There's been many times where it said the Aussies don't have the cattle, which is what they're saying about the Welsh guys in recent times. They're in very similar positions, but the Aussies still managed to go 3 from 3 against the Welsh, 2 times down in Australia and then once over in Cardiff. They got beaten by Fiji at home. It's just not been a good year for the Welsh. And for the Italians, I'll give them a B. It's been mixed. The Italians, I feel like being the underdogs. The games where they've been a favourite, they've tended to underperform a bit. Like they did better than they usually do in the Six Nations. 2 wins, a draw, and 2 losses is their best ever. They still finished 5th, but that's their best ever kind of set of results in the Six Nations. So you've got to give a fair bit of credit there. They beat Japan really handily when they played them, but they played Samoa and lost, which was a pretty poor result in the July matches. They beat Tonga in their match against them, so it was a bit of a mixed bag on tour. They struggled against Georgia, but then they did better than they usually do in their loss against the All Blacks. They got hammered by Argentina, so it's been mixed. It's maybe like a B minus. In the games where they were genuinely kind of given a bit of a shot or went in as favourites, like against Samoa and Georgia, they didn't do maybe as well as expected. In other games, they've kind of overperformed. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag in Gonzalo Quesada's first year. Rugby Championship sides, the ABs, I'll give them a C. I was going to say a B. It's okay. They lost the big games. They lost the 2 games against the Box. They had some competitive moments, but over the course of the 80 were still the second best side. They lost to the Argentinians at home. That was a really low-level performance. They managed to get a decent run in the autumn. They managed to beat Ireland, which was a big boon. Managed to beat England. Lost by 1 point to France. Certainly no disgrace in there. And then were pretty lackluster against the Italians. Good win over the Japanese. Good win over the Fijians. But those games should be pretty big wins for the AB. So in Razor's first year, it's been okay. It's maybe like a C plus or a B minus. I don't know. He's maybe relied a little bit too much on some of the veterans. We might have liked to seen a few more guys blooded, but he's gotten the best out of Wallace Satiti, who's been a great newcomer. So Flirting between a C and a B. What can I say? Maybe I'm being a bit harsh. Pumas, I think we give them a B. It's a pretty good B. Expectations maybe weren't that high for Felipe Contepomi. First big-time international coaching gig for him. Goes 1-1 against the French when they hosted them. They'll be really disappointed with that first game. Goes 1-1 with the All Blacks. It was a good one, then a bad one. They went 1-1 with the Wallabies, a bad one, then a good one. They went 1-1 with the Box, a good one, then a bad one. So that's been the story of their season. They finished the season relatively well. They hammered the Italians. They pushed the Irish all the way. They'll be a little bit disappointed with their game up against France, but they've certainly showed that they can be right up there. They have actually claimed some pretty big scalps this year, which I think speaks volumes for them. And as I mentioned, kind of like the Italians in the Six Nations, for these guys in the Rugby Championship, they exceeded their kind of normal expectations, which is that they don't usually beat each of their opponents. The Wallabies, I'm going to stick down here with the All Blacks and give them a C. Joe Schmidt's had a bit of a rebuilding job, so maybe this is a bit harsh. They beat Wales in their opening tour. They beat the Georgians. You wouldn't say any of those results were particularly spectacular, but as I said, Joe Schmidt's been putting the pieces back together. They only managed the one win at the Rugby Championship and had some downright bad performances in that Rugby Championship. There were some bad results. And there's some good patches as well. Pushed the All Blacks in one game. Managed to get a win over the Pumas, but then got absolutely flogged the next week. Tour of Europe started pretty well with a couple of good wins, but maybe that was getting the Aussie hype train a little bit too high. It's a little bit back down to earth. They were not great against the Scots. And then they pushed Ireland. So maybe it's being a bit harsh. Maybe we can give the Aussies a B. But if we're looking at it as a results-based business, again, they didn't kind of convert some of those close games into wins, like the Irish game, like the All Blacks game. If we look at the stats, there's still some pretty concerning areas for the Wallabies, but I do feel like they're trending in the right direction. And then the Box, you got to give the Box the A. Only lost 2 games all year, both of which by a point. Managed to do the double over the All Blacks, managed to be one of only 2 teams to have a perfect Autumn Nation Series, going 3 for 3 in their tour of Europe. Won the Rugby Championship, won the Freedom Cup, number 1 in the world, and blooded a whole bunch of players. They've used 50 players in the year. So it's been a pretty good year for South African rugby. So yeah, like I say, a few of these teams you could probably shift around a little bit. If you were being hard on Ireland with their recent performance levels, you could dip them. But as I said, they still managed to get the results. Maybe I've been a bit hard on the ABs and the Wallabies. I do feel like the Scottish side is better than what they show at times. They need to get some of those big scalps next year. Wales and Japan are certainly rebuilding, and Borthwick, I think, can get better out of his squad in 2025. But you guys let us know your thoughts. Not everybody can win them. That's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, you guys let us know how you would rank them if you were ranking them. If you want to get yourself some rugby gear, maybe some All Blacks gear, check out the All Blacks store down in the description. If you want some British and Irish Lions jerseys, down in the description. I'm an affiliate of both of those stores. With Christmas not too far away, a bit of rugby jersey shopping is always a welcome one. But yes, check those links out. You guys let us know your thoughts on how you would rank them. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. Together.